Hey there, welcome to SharkCast Pty Ltd podcast dedicated to the greatest sporting club in the history of the world, the mighty Cronulla Sharks. As always, this show is brought to you by Dyson Logistics, the Royal Motor Yacht Club in Port Hacking, and Jason Hawes at Cripps & Cripps Real Estate. My name is Sam Shinazzi. I'm an OG from 2015, 11th season of podcasting, supporting this club for a lot longer than that. Seen a lot of ups and downs throughout my times. And we are playing the Raiders on Thursday night, and we need to get someone in who knows all about the Raiders, but someone who also has a soft spot for the Sharks. And I would like to welcome everyone I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time making his debut after 11 years. Bit of revenge here, actually, now I think about it. Mr. Nick Campton from the Boom Rookies podcast, and also from the great Rugby League journalistic world that we all live in. Nick, how you going, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's good to be here. I'm hoping for the best Sharks-related debut since Jack Bird. So fingers crossed I can offer something.
Jack Bird, Tim Smith, they all make great debuts, man. So
do they ever?
Welcome to the show. Now, it took me 11 years to crack Boom Rookies officially, and now you've cracked that. Let's talk about Boom Rookies first of all. It's a very successful podcast that you're a large part of, you and your little mate Matty Bungard. It had different origins, but were you on board from the start, or did you come in a bit later on?
No, I sort of came in a bit later. To start with, it was Matt Bungard, who I'm sure will be familiar to people on this show. I think he's the South's guest whenever the Sharks and Rabbitohs meet. It was him and two other mates, Mitch Doyle and Dale Roots. And then over the years, the show sort of evolved a little bit. I was mates with the boys, so I was a guest on there sometimes. And then Mitch and Dale had to leave in pretty quick succession for, real life reasons. And Bungard asked me if I wanted to step into the chair, and I did. And still don't know if I regret it or not, but we have a lot of fun over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very successful podcast, part of the ESPN family, which is amazing. And you guys were in Las Vegas where we last caught up, and we had a great time. That's where I made my Boom Rookie debut. You were drinking those funny drinks like by the gallon every 10 minutes. What were those drinks you had? The cans of...
I don't actually remember.
Whatever it was, you were enjoying it.
Yeah, it was a big few days, and there's no rules in Vegas either, for better and for worse. So I definitely was drinking something, but the exact nature of it kind of eludes me.
Well, this was around breakfast time, so you were doing really good, and we had a lot of fun over there.
There's no clocks in the casinos, man, so time didn't exist.
There's no clocks in Vegas, thank goodness. Now, we have to point out, yes, you're a very big Raiders fan. Let's talk about that. What's your first memory of being a Raiders fan? How old were you? What was the era, etc.?
Well, it's one of those things that is just such an inextricable part of who I am that I don't actually remember it starting or how it started. I've got a couple of relatives who think they got me into it. I've got a couple of very old mates who reckon they got me into it as well, but I don't actually remember a time when I didn't go for the Raiders. And ever since, or as long as I can remember, it's been a huge part of my life. Probably a little bit of too much sometimes, you can get carried away with it all and all that. There's a great story that my family loves to tell all the time that I dredged up the other day. A good mate of mine, Frankie, who's a Souths fan, his boy, Connor, we were taking him to his first game, and it was that Sharks-Souths game down at Shark Park the other week. So as we were driving down, I was telling the story about the first game I went to, which was Raiders-Dragons in 1999. The Raiders lost 44-2, and Blacklock and Mundine, I think they both scored hat-tricks. They're doing all sorts of their backflips or whatever. And to that point, I was 6 years old, and I didn't really understand that the Raiders could lose games. It was something I would come to learn, but at the time I didn't quite get it. And my family tells the story about how it's full time. I'm just in tears. Like, I'm absolutely losing it. And some old Dragons fan has patted me on the back and he's saying, "Don't worry, mate, they'll be back." And some other fellow walking past went, "No, they won't. He's got to learn sometime." And the second guy was right. So there you go. I kind of got on the team at the worst possible time, right at the end of the glory years. And it's been an interesting quarter century since, to say the least.
So in your viewing lifetime, one grand final only a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And Bungard likes to tease me a lot about saying that I go for a tin pot club because all I can celebrate is a preliminary final victory. And it might not be much, but it's what we got, so I wouldn't trade it for anything. Except
I'd
probably trade it for a premiership, but still.
People listening to this show, Campo, know exactly how you feel about 8 years ago. That all changed, but we all know celebrating a prelim. Remember about that? Not even a prelim win, actually. A couple of cases. Anyway, that's awesome. Who's your all-time favorite Raider?
It's Jared Croker. Like I said, I kind of missed out on Meninga and Daly and Stewart and all that. Like I remember the very end of Daly and Stewart and all that, but even at that point, they were kind of more emeritus figures. I didn't really get to celebrate them for the Raiders in their prime, and I was a big Clinton Tchaikovsky fan in the early 2000s. But and then I was a huge Todd Carney dude, because Todd Carney was sort of the first guy that I remember hearing like whispers about him. Oh, there's this kid in Jersey Flegg and he's going to be unbelievable. He's the next Ricky Stewart. And then totally broke my heart when he got himself sacked and all that. But Croker might not have hit the heights of some of those other players, but the love that he had for the club and the fact that he was so proud to be a Raider. And I think he's just a great representative of what the Raiders are supposed to be. Local guys come good. And I do think he was maybe underrated by a lot of people outside the Raiders fan base. I'm certain that if he played in Sydney, he would have played for New South Wales and Australia and all that. But I really wanted that for him for a long time. But as I got older, I sort of made my peace with it. I was like, you know what? He doesn't need the world because he's got Canberra. And especially in sort of the mid-2010s, I know people might laugh at that, but in the mid-2010s, when Canberra were finding it really, really hard to sign anyone, there's the Tedesco backflip. They were meant to get Kevin Proctor and Josh Mansour back when those would have been really big signings. Sharks fans will remember Michael Ennis very nearly came to the club before ended up linking with Cronulla, and it felt like Canberra couldn't sign anyone. It felt like no one wanted to go there. And at the time, Croker was the best player at the club by a mile, and he's proof that you can still be here and be a really good player. And it sort of got him through some really tough times. And I was really glad that he was able to be there for the success they sort of had at the end of that decade. The 19 grand final and the prelim in 20 and all of that sort of deal. And to be frank as well, he's one of the last players to come through the ranks who was older than me as well. And it's just a little bit different when you're talking about guys who are 5-10 years younger than you. It's different when it's someone who you looked up to when you were still a boy. So Kroger's my number one always.
Yeah, right. And sorry, I don't know if you've mentioned this or not. Did you grow up in the area?
No, I grew up in Camden.
Okay.
I grew up in Camden and was 12 years old when the Tigers won that premiership in 2005. So how I dodged that bullet, I'll never know. But yeah, like I said, I don't actually know why I go for the Raiders. It's just kind of always been a part of me. I've never lived in Canberra. I've got some relatives down there, and we used to go down there in the school holidays or what have you. But never actually lived there or anything like that. Just kind of got saddled with it.
Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do, tell us a bit about your journalism career, where you've been, how, why, where you are now. Give us a lowdown on the Nick Campton journo story.
So I got my start at the Daily Telegraph. Started there in 2015, 10 years ago yesterday, actually, which is, troubling, made me feel old. And I was sort of doing a lot of production stuff and writing a little bit for them for probably 4 or 5 years. And then during COVID, I got bumped up to the main roster on the paper. I was a beat reporter there for a couple of seasons. And then I made the move over to the ABC. And right now I write for the ABC website, mainly rugby league stuff, a little bit of other things, but it'd be like 85% league. And I really love it there. I'm really allowed to sort of do my stories my way. I'd like to think I've got a bit of a different perspective and a different voice to a lot of the mainstream media out there. And I just love telling stories. I love telling stories about this game and the people that play it and the people that support it. And so if you like that sort of thing, abc.net.au/sports/rugby league, and just about everything on there's related to me. So please go check it out. I need the clicks.
And so do you do more color things than game reviews or whatever? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, massively. So yeah, like very much so. More color things, maybe a little bit of analysis here and there. Sort of, like I said, going for a different perspective. I'm a big believer that I don't need to write about what actually happened in a game because everyone who cares enough to click on a story probably already watched and probably already knows. But if I can bring a different perspective over, I can say why something was important or outline why a fella's playing well or the journey that he's been on to get to where he is or what success means for him or what failure might mean for him or his team or where they sort of sit historically and all that sort of thing. I much prefer that sort of thing. It's kind of footy coverage by sickos for a sicko, you know?
I think we need it, man. I think that there is way too much, very short, basic. Here's what happened last night in the game. Here's the minute it happened. And I understand the world we're living in. We don't have long attention spans, etc. But I love the fact that you're focusing on this kind of thing. And the fact that ABC let you do it is awesome. We can never let that kind of, coverage go away. I mean, our mate Riccio does it really well for the telly.
Yeah, for sure.
But we need more. And you're obviously leading that charge, which is awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your beloved Canberra this year. They're 2-2, a great start. You were hanging off the roof of the Allegiant Stadium when they were thrashing the Warriors in front of our own eyes, and then they came home and had a really good win over the Broncos. That was really impressive. And the last 2 weeks, they've gone down to Manly at Brookie in a pretty bad loss. And not great last week against the Cowboys up in Townsville. What do you make of this season? What are your thoughts so far on the Canberra Raiders?
It's been a roller coaster, man, because not only did they win those first two games, they played the exact way I want them to play. I like to think I'm pretty realistic about the Raiders and I've got a pretty good grasp of what they can do and how they can do it. And the sort of footy that they played in those 2 weeks, which is super physical, slow the ruck down as best you can, get Jamal Fogarty turning the ball over in uncomfortable positions for the other side, and then maybe putting a little bit of structure on the top of that. That's exactly what I want them to do. And I think that's a style of play that has quite a high floor. And that's been a problem for the Raiders the last couple of years. Every now and then they can turn up and have a real sort of dogfight with one of the top teams in the competition. But then they can turn around and concede 48 points to the West Tigers like they did last season. They've really struggled to narrow that gap between their best and their worst performance. And after the first 2 weeks of the year, I thought, oh, well, that's a thing of the past. I'll see you in October, boys. This is happening. But then the last 2 weeks, they've just sort of really regressed to a lot of bad habits that have been in the side for a while. And the main one of that is when something goes bad, they can spiral really quickly. An error from one of the back three, and Weeks and Tamale and Savage all do have an error in them, can quickly lead to conceding a try, or an error in good ball can quickly lead to conceding a penalty, and all of a sudden the field position is totally flipped. That happened really badly against Manly, particularly in that first half where Canberra their discipline really fell apart, and I think they had 9 play the balls in the last 20 minutes of the half, and Manly put it on, I think it was 10,000 points in that time. But then the same thing happened against the Cowboys. Yeah. They've had the really good start. Joe Tarpanay had scored the opener. They're up 8-0. And then they just have a couple of defensive lapses, and all of a sudden it's 16-8, and Jake Clifford looks like he's going to win the Dally M against them. There were other parts of that Cowboys game that were really dispiriting. I love Xavier Savage as a player, but that draw and pass that he sort of bungled with Owen Paddy that I think would have put the Raiders up, that really hurt. But that's a good example of what I'm talking about. So Savage makes the break, should pass it to Paddy for the try. Instead, he gets tackled. The next play is a turnover. Then there's 2 quick penalties, and then Corey Horsburgh right in front of the posts does a really dumb, weird hip drop thing. And instead of the Raiders being up by 2, all of a sudden they're down by 6 in the space of about, 90 seconds or whatever. So that's what I'm really looking for from Canberra over these next few weeks. Just get that, at least minimize that period where everything goes to shit really, really quickly.
And
lift that floor a little bit.
Is that inexperience? Is that just, I don't know, just bad football? Like, what do you put it down to?
I'm not really sure, because it seems to be different guys doing it like poor old Kyle Weeks is probably the exception. He's had 2 really rough games in a row. I'm still a big believer in his talent, and I'm glad that Ricky Stewart stuck with him for this one. But it just seems to be different things every week. Like against Manly, it was very much the left side that kind of fell apart. Seb Chris had a tough game defensively. Then against the Cowboys, it was the other side of the field. It was Matt Timoko who had a really poor defensive game. So that's the other troubling part. It seems to be a different thing every week. And Canberra are very much a side that have to be kind of greater than the sum of their parts. They're never going to have a team of champions. They have to have a champion team. Everyone's got to really work together and do their part. So when you've got a couple of guys who are having bad weeks or a bad patch, it can really, really stand out. So it's hard, mate. It's hard to put a finger on because I think their top 17 is actually quite strong, but it just seems they struggle to get consistency as a team from 1 to 17.
Because in Las Vegas, in front of my eyes, they were high on energy. And I get it's round one. Yeah. They're in another country, full stadium. I get all that. They were pretty much the main event, given the time slot and everything. But I couldn't believe the energy they had. And I was like, well, if they play like this when they can most weeks, they're going to be right up there. I agree with you. Because I was just so blown away by the enthusiasm, the energy, and the toughness as well. And we did see that against Brisbane, but yeah, you're right. The last 2 weeks it's fallen over. Maybe it is a Vegas hangover. I don't know. I mean, we saw the Sharkies last week just fall apart in the second half, and we're not quite sure why. They're down to the 2-man bench, but there might be something in that theory about just traveling so far. I'm not sure, but coming home to Canberra this week, you have to expect a lot more, and you would think Ricky's going to get right up them, yeah?
I would hope so. I think he probably gave a few blokes a spray after that Cowboys game. He sort of intimated in the press conference that wasn't happy with a few of their performances. The 5-day turnaround from a Townsville trip, that kind of scares me. It was so hot in Townsville that not only did they have the drinks break, they also had the extended halftime. It's very rare that they have both those things in an NRL game. But I'm also a big believer that once you start talking about 5-day turnarounds and off the back of travel and all that, while it is a really big factor, I want to go for a team that can rise above those circumstances. So the minute I start talking about that with the Raiders, I feel like I'm already setting myself up for disappointment, So, I don't know. Maybe my expectations on it are too high or whatever. But that energy that you're talking about in Vegas, when Canberra's playing like that, they're really hard to beat, even for some of the top sides in the competition. But I think the thing that really troubles me the last 2 weeks is their discipline. I think over the last 2 weeks, I think it's 18 penalties and 17 set restarts. And I'm not doing the Ricky Stewart thing where I'm bagging the refs. I'm saying Canberra's discipline has to improve. They are a team that likes to control the ruck and slow things down. And I think a slower pace game really does favour them, especially against the Sharks, who love to play so up tempo. And when you do that, when you do try to slow things down, there are going to be times when you get penalised off the field. So they've just got to be smarter about how they do that. They can't give the referees an opportunity to they can't give the referees the opportunity to give the Sharks so much good ball like that, because that's what happened against Manly and they couldn't recover. And it's kind of what happened to a large extent against the Cowboys as well, and they couldn't recover from that either.
What can you tell me about Savelo Tamale? I haven't watched a lot of him week in, week out, deep analysis. And he's sort of catching my eye. He's got a lot of good stats this year. He's got some negative ones as well. But he seems like a sort of go-to guy this year as far as your 3 quarters go. Is that fair assessment?
I can tell you that he's perfect, and I love him.
Okay.
No, so he's a young guy. He only came to the club this year. He's a St. George Illawarra junior, got a game in for them last year. Canberra are a bit of a funny team. They haven't had a huge emphasis on back 5 yardage over the last couple of years, even though that's really come into vogue. Like, they've had blokes who are good at it, but they've never really had a dude who, that's his primary attribute, is sort of yards out of the backfield. But that's what Tamale has really provided. He's still a little bit green and he's still got some errors in him, but his work rate is second to none. And he can really, really bust a tackle as well. He's been a really good addition to that Raiders backline. He's just really offered something that they haven't had as much over the last couple of years. I don't think he played a whole lot of league growing up. I think he was more of a union player. I think he only came to league full time when he's about 15, 16, 17. So there are still some rough edges there. He does love really rushing up and in defensively against a team like the Sharks, again, that move the ball so well from side to side. That might be something they can target. But I've really been impressed with him through these first 4 games. And in a team that has struggled for consistency through those 4 games, I think he has really, really found it. So from a young guy, that's really, really pleasing. And even if there are teething problems, I'm more than happy to put up with him, man. I think he's going to be a real player of the future for this side.
Well, he's busted the 3rd most tackles in the comp so far. Only Hawes and Tedesco have more, so he's getting busy.
Good company to keep.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think about your halves? Ethan Strange, Jamal Fogarty. You're fans of both these guys? You think they're going well?
I think Fogarty's got a pretty. I talk about high floors and low ceilings a fair bit. It's a verbal tick I go into, but Fogarty's kicking game gives him quite a high floor, because even if nothing else is working for the Raiders, Jamal Fogarty can put up a really good spiral bomb or a really pinpoint crossfield kick or a nice grubber or whatever. His kicking game is one of the very few individual skills that the Raiders have that I think is at an elite level. And it's the one thing that when he's not there, they really can't replace. Strange, I thought, had a great start to the year in Vegas and then has struggled to back that up a little bit. I like to see Strange and Fogarty linked together as much as possible, but that hasn't really happened as much as I would like. Like how Canberra didn't put a huge emphasis on back 5 yardage. I don't think they've ever had a huge emphasis on having a passer in the middle of the field either. Right. You know, and that's something that I think when I talk about Canberra not having great attacking structures, I actually think a lot of that stems from not having that passing presence in the middle of the field. Corey Horsburgh can kind of do it. Joe Tapine can kind of do it. Josh Papali'i can throw a nice pass here and there, but they don't have a Cam McInnes type, you know, who is quite adept at first receiver, even if it's just getting space for Trindle and Hines. It's an interesting contrast between the two sides. So I really like it if Strange could have a big breakout performance. I think his running game is the key to that. And I think the key to sort of making that happen is just getting him in space with some favorable matchups as much as possible. So I think Fogarty gets a pass mark. I know Manly is sniffing around him. I really don't want him to leave just yet. Strange, I've probably expected a little bit more from over these first 4 rounds. But, you know, maybe a big Thursday night home game against a good side, against a really good halves combination. Maybe that's the challenge they need to really sort of break out and play some of their best footy.
So checking out the forward pack, it's going to be a good battle. You've got Papali'i versus Fanua Blake, 2 decent hookers in Starling Brayley. You got Joey Tapine, the captain, who I love, against Oregon Kafusi, who needs to lift after a pretty poor week. And then the back row battle is young Nicholson and Horsburgh, probably the biggest lock to ever live, against Nickera, Wilton, and McInnes. So I think you got us there for size, my friend. I'm not sure how that's going to go. The brute force against the maybe more mobile pack, Fanua Blake aside, but that's a good battle coming up.
Absolutely. As an old front rower myself, I can sometimes get in the weeds and just think, yeah, well, whoever wins the forwards wins the game. But I think you're right that it's an interesting clash of styles because the Raiders do have that real size to them, you know, with Papali'i and Tapine and Horsburgh. And even on the bench, like Smithies is a big lad and so is Mariota and all that. But I actually think across the league over the last couple of years, size in the middle is less of a consideration. It's still a nice thing to have and it can still win your games, but that ability to move the ball is as important as having size in your pack. So Cronulla might lack a little bit of size, but they make up for that, I think, with the skill of some of those players. And then the addition of Fanua Blake, who I think has been excellent through 4 rounds, that still gives them that real blockbusting presence. So I actually see this game coming down to who gets to dictate the style of the match, a little bit similar to Cronulla's game against Canterbury last week. If it can be like that and it's right, it's up the guts and it's tight and it's physical and it's niggling and it's stop-start, I think that really favours the Raiders. But if there's long periods of unbroken play, a lot of set-for-set battles, not a lot of set starts, I think that really favours the Sharks. Think back, I know it's different teams and all that, but I think to the 2 games last year that these two sides played. The first one, where Canberra got out to a big lead at Shark Park and got run down, and then the second one, where the Sharks won 40-0 and I wanted to run into traffic. Both times, Cronulla just played with a pace that Canberra couldn't sustain. And Canberra looked exhausted. Not by the end of the game, by about 60 minutes in. They just couldn't compete with it. So if Cronulla can play to that pace, I sort of see them winning and maybe winning pretty well. But if Canberra can kind of drag the game down into their sort of style, I give them much more of a chance. Bit low on them right now, so I don't know if I give them a huge chance, but I'd give them a shot, certainly.
Well, based on last week's Sharks game, that's where you want to go, because we know that, as you said, when we keep ball in hand, ball in play, we can keep the energy up and do what we did last year and just sort of make you tired. But if you get down to a hit up a thorn and Fogarty's kicking the ball into touch and kicking us around the ground, then absolutely, that could be a real tough battle for the Sharks. It's something they need to do this year to take that next level, is really learn how to do the gritty stuff. And they've done it in the Fitzgibbon era in periods. It's not like they can't do it. It's just they need to know how to do it and do it consistently and do it well. So, I mean, you know, there's a turn in the air, Campo. It's my favorite time of year. It's a bit cooler. Maybe it'll affect the game. The weather down there tomorrow night, who knows? But if it gets into a grind, I don't mind your boys head to head. Sharks have won the last 3 games. Prior to that, you really had you had all the wins, 2019 to 2023. It was just a Raidathon. Do you have any specific favorite games, putting you on the spot? Sharks Raiders, any special wins in your mind? Does your mind go back that far? Anything grab out?
It's funny, man. From 2008 to 2020, the Raiders and the Sharks played in the finals every 4 years. And it went Sharks win, Raiders win, Sharks win, Raiders win. And then sort of towards that end of the decade too, there was a bit of a period where I thought, at least, the games between the two of them had some real spice about them as well. So I guess in terms of favourites, that 2012 semi-final down at Canberra, so it was 6th versus 7th, and Todd Carney was playing for the Raiders. Every time he played against the Raiders, it was a really big deal for me. That's the game where Shandor Earl scores a couple of great tries in the first half, and it's just really back and forth. Papali'i has a great running battle with Gallen, and Canberra end up getting the cash after. I think Carney does his Achilles or something with about 20 minutes to go. That's a real favourite. I've got a soft spot for the 2020 final as well, where honestly a really battered Sharks team who would. I think they had Connor Tracy and Chad Townsend in the halves by that point. I think Tracy was like their 3rd or 4th string guy. They sort of limped into the finals, but they'd given a great count of themselves. They're up 20-6 just before the break, but then George Williams got a long range intercept try that sort of got the Raiders going and all of that. And then Canberra didn't win it, but I actually think the best game that the two of them have ever played is that game in 2016 in the first week of the finals. There's a thing that we do on our show called Greatest Games, where we go back and watch an awesome game from the past. The only rule is no grand finals, and we just sort of talk about the two sides and all that. We do it for our Patreon listeners. One of our Sharks listeners requested it, and we did that. And I don't think, if Cronulla don't win that game, I don't think they win the premiership. You know,
that's correct.
Winning that match without Gallen and with Wade Graham getting knocked out very early in the game, and a really young Kurt Capewell coming on and having an absolute blinder, and Matt Pryor just being the best player on the field. I think it's the best win that Cronulla have in that Premier. Like, aside from the grand final, but aside from that, I think it's the best win Cronulla have in that premiership year. And it's just when they showed really true championship qualities. I was devastated that Canberra lost. And Ennis doing the Viking clap in front of the Raiders fans is like, I still see it when I close my eyes or whatever. But I think that's the best game that the two of them have played in the NRL era.
Yeah, look, there's arguments to be said that that's the best win the Sharks have ever had in their history, because, as you say, if they don't win that, they're probably not going all the way. And the way they did it, the circumstances, it was absolute theatre. And even, Gerard Bill turning the ball over with like 30 seconds to go and you guys going down the right. Like, it wasn't over until it was over. That's why I think Mickey was so pumped up. But Yeah, an absolute classic. If any of our younger listeners haven't seen that one for whatever reason, or if anyone hasn't watched it for a while, go back and check that out because, as Campo says, a fantastic game in our history. It might get a run on the old Fox Sports this week, I reckon, leading up to the
Make a few
big
calls
game on Thursday. Yeah, make a few calls. Campo, before we let you go, let's talk a little bit more about Cronulla because I know you have a soft spot for them, and also this is a Sharks podcast. Let me get a little bit of history from you. Who's your favorite all-time Shark? And it can't be Todd Carney.
Okay, so I've been rolling this around in my head since you sort of told me to prepare for it. I think my two number ones are Luke Lewis and Wade Graham. Luke Lewis and Wade Graham. I always loved Luke Lewis when he was at the Panthers. Loved the longevity that he showed at the Sharks. Remember those two? I think it was in his last year. I think it was in 18, and he got those two length of the field intercept tries back to back as a grizzled old 35-year-old back rower. Yep. Like, how can you not love that? He's someone who, whenever he was playing for New South Wales or whenever I wanted the Sharks to win a game, I just always felt better that he was out there because there was just nothing he couldn't do. He could run the ball. He could pass before the line. He could pass at the line. He had a little kicking game on him as well. He was super tough and durable. In that Raiders,
he kicked the ball for Valentine Holmes.
He puts that great kick in for Val Holmes. And I remember at the time thinking, it's probably not another back rower in the game that could do that play at that time. The only other one who could is Wade Graham. And Wade Graham is different because I loved Luke Lewis always, but Wade Graham, I sort of really grew to love him as a footballer when he got to the Sharks and when he settled in to the back row. And it's kind of the same thing, man. He was just a really smart, really tough footballer who I always felt good when I was supporting a team that had Wade Graham on it, you know, down that left edge with such great touch, but such great physicality as well. They're two of my absolute favorites. But then to take it right back, Matt Rogers was always a really big one for me as well. So I sort of started watching footy in the late 90s. There was a 99 season highlights video that I had that went for about 2.5 hours. It was on VHS. I think I watched it so many times I wore the tape out. And there's a lot of Sharks on there because the Sharks were in the minor premiership that year. And some of the stuff Matt Rogers was doing was just absolutely unbelievable. He looks like he's from the future. Some of the athletic plays that he's putting on there. So always really loved him as well. I probably went through a period with the Sharks, and it was during that time when they had a lot of good games against the Raiders. I would say they're a bit of a disagreeable team at times. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely modern Sharks. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, but the current Sharks have a lot of guys that I really like because I watched a lot of them come through at Newtown. I love going down to Henson Park and all that. Yeah. Particularly that 2019 side that won the state championship. And they had Will Kennedy, Mulatalo, Katoa, Hines, Blake Brayley. I think Teague Wilton was on that team. Talakai was on that side. So many guys who came through the Jets that I've got a big soft spot for. That's if you told me 10 years ago that I would end up having a lot of affection for a lot of the Sharks players, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are.
Yeah, it's a really likable team at the moment. I having the great blessing of dealing with them week to week. There's no one in the team that's even remotely close to being a bad guy. It might be Fanua Blake just because of like he's big and scary, but the interactions have been fine, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it comes from the coach. The coach is a real sweetheart, and he likes to keep things very much above board, and he's very old school. And you know, the players know about the history of the club. The players know how to treat people. I'm not suggesting that the majority wouldn't anyway, but he just really emphasizes all that kind of thing. And so now when you see him run out, I get that people still attach the club with different things that have happened in the past, but I'm with you. I think they're a pretty likable team. Like,
they're a good
hard
group of
not
lads.
To like you might go, oh, that guy could play better, or that guy's got a weakness in. But as far as like whether you like them or don't like them, I'm quite proud of this current mob and who I get to say I support this team because, you know, touch wood, but they're mostly pretty sweet dudes, and that doesn't mean they're going to win a comp, but it's half the battle, right? Having good people in your club I think it's important.
Absolutely. We just do a couple more XO things about the Sharks just to I presume finish up. What do you think of Mwene Hiroti getting that center spot? I know he's a third
think
string guy, but Iro's just been so good this year and offered so much. And Talakai is like as good a first drop as anyone could ask for. Marotti,
Ooh.
kind of probably a little bit of a journeyman. How do you feel about him?
So I think it's the right move at this point of the season. The Talakai thing at the center, we're kind of over that now. We've done that.
Oh, okay.
There's been
That's
a
the
lot of
word from Sharkland.
success. Yeah, there's
Yep.
been a lot of success, but just in defense at big times with guys running around him, he just doesn't have that body to turn and kind of run. So
Okay.
we love Talakai. He's an amazing athlete. But as far as center goes, there are just other options. I think I thought you were going to go with, should they go for someone younger like a Viela or even a Michael Gabriel, which I don't think they're quite ready. So I think it's the right move. Hirotti's been tearing up New South Wales Cup for the Jets for a few years, including this year. He is a journeyman, but he's still probably mid-20s. He's not crazy old. And the more he's played in first grade, he gets 2 or 3 games a year, the better he's gotten, to the point where in Perth, I think 2 years ago, he was man of the match against Souths. Early in his career, we saw him play some real howlers, and it was not pretty. But I think we've gone past that, and I think it's the right move. Like, we'll see what happens on Thursday night. But what I will say is he's not Kale Iro, and Iro was dominating Stephen Crichton in that game. I don't think Crichton scores that try if Iro's there defending. So I think it's a massive loss, and he's almost impossible at this point to replace. Yeah.
The other guy at the Sharks that I really, really like is at Canberra last year, Hohepa Puru.
Yeah.
So he hasn't got into first grade yet. I was gutted when Canberra let him leave because I think he is that sort of passing lock forward that they've kind of lacked a little bit. Is there a way for him to get into this Sharks team? And do you think what he provides is something they've been missing?
There's definitely a way, and I think the way is he just keeps playing his butt off, which he's doing in lower grades. He played All-Stars. He's a big part of the club now, him and his brother, culturally and things they do away from the field. He's a big part of what is going on down there. And like, he's impressed everyone with attitude on and off the field. So I think he's pretty close. Maybe it'll take an injury or a suspension or a rep footy game or whatever. But I think once he gets in there, he might hold his spot. And I think the reason he's not there instead of Atkinson, the reason Atkinson is there is just Atkinson's got that versatility of being a back, whereas Hohepa's just more of a middle edge. He plays a bit of hooker, but he can't really fit into that back line necessarily. So I think that's why he's not there and Atkinson is. But otherwise, they're pretty high on him. So I think your man might get in there at some point this year. And I sort of feel for a guy like Billy Burns, who's more of an edge, but Billy Burns has been lights out as well for the Jets for a couple of years now.
He's been awesome,
he's a really important part of that extended bench. Like the extended bench the Sharks have with the Hiroti, with all those Jets guys that we've mentioned, it's kind of harking back to 2016 when we had these guys you could call upon, and they wouldn't really let you down. They may not win the game for you, but they're not going to lose it for you. And I think almost Puru's kind of gotten ahead of Billy Burns now on that ladder. So we'll see what happens. But I reckon you'll get a go. I reckon the next couple of months he'll find his way because his form is really good.
I reckon Kavusi's just had a really tough start of the year. I know he's someone who's sort of been a fixture at the club recently and he's re-signed on a big deal. But imagine him dropping out of the team. Rudolph starts for like a 15-minute maniac burst of energy like he had off the bench against Canterbury. And then Puru comes on once the game opens up. And then a really great passing team becomes even more dangerous. I'm kind of enchanted with that possibility, I feel like it would take Cronulla's great strengths and make them even stronger,
Yeah, I agree. And I'd watched him play last year, but I didn't know much about him. And then when he was signed, it was pretty low key. And then a bunch of Canberra people were saying, I can't believe we let this guy go. And then I spoke to a bunch of Cronulla people and they were like, yeah, wait till you see him play. He's really handy. And then his trial form was excellent, All-Stars game, and now for the Jets. So Yeah, they've got a good one. I think he'll be sticking around. I think they'll re-sign him, and his brother is improved a lot too. His brother's a bit maligned, but he's improved as a halfback as well. So I think they'll keep him together, and they'll keep him for the next sort of year or two at least. But yeah, I think your man might get in there. I think he will.
Awesome. It'll break my heart.
Well, we're
Come home,
Campo.
Come home to Canberra.
All right, Campo, give us one last spruik about Boom Rookies and ABC.
Yeah, so Boom Rookies, we've got 2 shows a week on our main feed. One that previews the round to come on the Friday, and then one reviews the round that just happened on the Monday. We also have a Patreon that you can sign up to. We have an exclusive Patreon show every Wednesday. We've got a lot of bonus shows. We've got a Discord that we've set up with a bunch of Rugby League sickos on there. I hate the internet, but the Discord's a pretty good place. So come by and give us a go if you want. And then for ABC, just click on all the stories on there from as many different IP addresses as possible, particularly the Rugby League ones. I'm really proud of a lot of the coverage we do there, not just of Rugby League, but of other sports as well. So go have a look, and if it's your sort of thing, keep coming back for more.
All right, Nick Campton, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Good luck on Thursday night. And I have no doubt we'll speak to you again in the near future. Please go check out Boom Rookies. Please check out the ABC website for his stories, and tell all your friends about that, because we love those guys at the Boom Rookies, especially. We even love Matty Bungard, even though he is the mutual pain in the butt for both of us. We do love him. So, Nick, thanks for your time. SharkCast listeners, we'll be back with more soon. Stay tuned. Until then, we're going to say up, and everyone take care. Nick, thanks for your time, my man.
Thanks so much for having me, man. This was fun.